So is that the case? And then how do you actually collect the data?
Yeah, that's a good question. And so, yes, that is the case. It is these, we bring it down to the most micro level, which is the gene, right? The gene variables. But much like genes in the human body, you know, they aggregate up to what you would call a trait. So a trait would be, the genomic variable lots of arguments or a despicable lead. And those aren't, tags. Those are triggered by genes scoring at certain thresholds to algorithmically create those variables. But much like the Pandora music genome, we've decided to take the same approach where you need a human being to watch and analyze a piece of content into all of these variables. And you might say, that's crazy. Why would you ever do that? But what we found is that it's not possible right now to get to that granular level, the level that you need to get to in order to confirm that you have accurate, consistent data. Because as you all know, in order to do great data science, you need clean data. Dirty data in, dirty data out. And so we've decided to take that human analyzed approach. But obviously, we are always constantly looking at these great ways that machine learning companies are doing it to try and see how can we augment aspects of this process. Realistically down the line, it's going to be a long way until a machine's going to be able to do this completely. But this hand analyzed approach, we found it really is transforming the industry, and our clients are loving it.
Great. So give us some examples of a gene or a trait category. Give us an example in terms of a film, TV series, or whatever it may be.
Yeah, great. So a gene would be, lead character one, from leader to follower on this scale. Where do they land, right? Or the 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 dialogue from base to erudite. Where does that dialogue land in that entire system? And so when those genes are scoring at certain thresholds, they would ultimately create a unique and defining directorial vision. Or like the movie Joker with Joaquin Phoenix. That not surprisingly, one of the traits was a disturbing experience. If you've seen that movie, it is a disturbing experience. It's a movie that you probably will only watch once, but it is an amazing film.
I saw some smiles
Yeah.
in agreement. Yeah. All right. Great. Okay. So you collect all this data about a piece of content. Let's say a movie. Let's stick to movies as an example. So then what? What is the value that can be extracted from this kind of data, as far as you can see in current applications or your vision for future applications in the industry?
Yeah. So our clients are the movie studios, streaming services, production companies, distribution companies, because in AVOD platforms, it's working with them to help them understand. Ultimately, what happened that's so interesting is that the industry turned from a B2B business to a B2C business. Back when I was producing movies, I'd make a movie and I'd give it to the movie theater and they'd release it, and I'd get some box office numbers, but that's maybe some demographic information, but that's about it. Or we'd give it to Walmart and they would release it, and I'd get some number of units sold, but that's it. With streaming, all of a sudden we have a B2B, B2C business where these movie studios, the Disneys, the Paramounts, the Universals of the world, have this direct relationship, and everyone is trying to understand the same thing. Who is my audience and what do they resonate with? And there's companies out there that help you understand your audience, absolutely. But what I would argue is that you can't understand your audience until you understand your content. Because if you have a deep understanding of content, you can pair that with behavioral data to start to tap into why certain audience segments resonate with a piece of content. And so actually our clients are using us to touch the entire life cycle of a piece of content, whether that's in the development phase or the production phase or green lighting, programming, or really the future, and where we spend a lot of our time is in the marketing phase. It's the targeted marketing, right? Because Nelson, you and I both might love, Top Gun Maverick, but the reason you're going to love that is probably different than the reason I'm going to love that. And so why would you use the same marketing message to engage you versus me? A good example of this, going wrong for me was the movie Get Out. I'm a total wuss when it comes to scary content. Like I'm the kind of guy where, I get, if it's at all scary, not a chance. And so I saw the trailer for Get Out, and it's a pretty scary trailer. And so there was, I saw that and I said, not a chance I'm seeing this. But then, it became one of the biggest movies of all time in that space. And so everyone's like, Andrew, you got to see it. So finally, 10 a.m., I decided I'm going to see this movie. And so I, pulled up the streaming service that it was on, and I ended up watching it and realizing, guess what, guys? That's not that scary. There's actually a lot of comedy. It's an issue-driven story. It's a friend saves the day story. Huh. If they had known my taste profile, they could have marketed that differently to me. And I would have absolutely seen that in theaters. You don't hide the fact that it is a scary movie. But if you lean into the variables that I personally will resonate with, they have another audience member. Think about how many Andrew Tights there are out there that did not see that movie because they don't like scary movies. Because, right now we classify content in the genre category. Genre dates back, to, the ancient Greeks. And, or maybe I might, don't fact check me on that, please. But it dates back a long, long, long time. And so why are we still using that to categorize content? So some of our clients will use that in the marketing side. A series just ended. Better Call Saul ends. How do you make sure you don't lose all those subscribers? Stranger Things ends. How do you make sure you don't lose all those subscribers? So it's if you deeply understand what matters to your viewer, and then you can message them other content that's on your platform in around the variables that they actually will resonate with. You can increase you can decrease your churn rate. And we're finding that with our clients.
So I think I'm envisioning, as a tech geek, kind of going back to my programming days with databases. I'm envisioning now this database with 2,500 genomic characteristics, in the top, and then records of movies and all kinds of content that have marks and scores for each genomic characteristic. And now I'm imagining, based on what you just said, a database with audience or viewer profiles and characteristics and taste and something. And then so from there you merge the two. Is that what you do? And is that what your clients are doing?
Yeah. So thank you for asking that. That's really true. The way that we vision taste, at Catch, we're trying to understand taste, why we like what we like. And so if you think about taste, it's, think about it kind of like a Venn diagram, right? With three different main circles. One side is content, another side is audience, and then a third is, contextual, what's going on in the world. So in the content side, you have a deep understanding of both the extrinsic data, that is behavioral data. That is like metadata. It's, cast, crew, budget, genre, if you will. And then you have the intrinsic, what's going on under the hood in this piece of content. And that is, genomic data. Then on the other side, in the audience side, it's really interesting because it's both a deep understanding of the individual. And there are great companies, Experian, and that has really, deep, rich data. And then you have behavioral data, right? And that behavioral data is, think streaming data. If you're a streaming platform, guess what? You have first-party data. Good for you. And so if you are able to take all of these pieces of data and then combine them together, what you can start to understand is by audience segment, whether that's on a geographic or demographic or, cluster of users or even individual, you can merge those two together to start to understand what variables resonate with Nelson and what resonate with Andrew. Because like we've talked about, there's different variables that matter to you versus me. But that doesn't mean that we won't both love the same piece of content. And so, what we've done is, one of our marquee tools is our media indexing tool. And so, in this tool, what we've done is we've taken a deep understanding of content, 4,000 plus genomically analyzed movies that have released in theaters around the world over, from 2010 to 2019, right before COVID. And then on the other side of the model, you have how those movies did on a country by country basis. And what you're able to do is, by using sophisticated machine learning that is way beyond my level of understanding, you are able to merge those two together to start to understand cultural preference. The great thing about this model is you can take any data. So if one of our clients wants to, do this in a black box, that's totally okay. Where if they have their proprietary streaming data, they can start to throw that in to start to tap into, how do I cluster my audience by taste instead of clustering by demography or clustering by genre? Because we've all been there. We've all been there on those streaming platforms where you watch that one, action movie, and it's like, here's 100 other action movies you're gonna love. And really, the reason I watched that action movie was because it was a story of, male bonding or brotherly love or, a unlikely friendship, not the fact that it was an action movie. Like, a great example is, I actually learned that I've always wondered why I didn't love Parasite. I should love it. As a movie producer, I should love this film. It won the Academy.
Why should you love it?
Because it's an Academy Award-winning movie. It's, it won Best Picture, right? And I knew it was good, but it didn't tap into my taste. But at the same time, I also, didn't finish Succession. I should finish Succession. This is a great piece of content. And, frankly, to be honest, guys, I don't love The Bachelor. It's not something that I seek out. But I realized that I actually don't love all three of those pieces of content for the exact same reason. And that's interesting. And the reason I have a hard time resonating with that piece of content is that every single one of those has an unlikable, unethical main character. And I have a really hard time resonating with unethical, unlikable main characters. It has nothing to do with the genre. I will happily watch a dating show. I will happily watch, a prestige drama on a network, and I'm happily watch a foreign film. But I really have a hard time resonating with those variables.
Wonderful. I love how you're making this presentation personal, and you all can probably relate to your taste with the examples you're giving. So now I want to know, as the title of this talk says, what's the catch? And hear me out. So catch is using humans to score and evaluate movies along 2,500 micro characteristics. So what's the catch? Why use humans? Why, for example, not use machines? And then, are machines your competitor? So tell us a little bit about your thoughts about that.
Yeah, this is something that I've gone back and forth about a lot. In the early days, I've seen enough sci-fi movies to think that you can just throw something at a machine and it can do everything. Turns out that's not possible right now. And so we decided to take this hand-coded approach because, as I mentioned earlier, the quality of the data is of the utmost importance to us. And getting to this real granular level think about the genome as being locked. It is, whether it's a movie that's coming out today, unless something completely changes in the ecosystem about the way movies are consumed, whether it becomes interactive or choose your own adventure, right? Everything can be analyzed into the same variables. And so we've decided to take that human coded approach because as great as machines are right now, when you use natural language processing and use computer vision and use all these amazing pieces of technology, you will do a pretty good job tagging a piece of content with a variable, right? But you have to rely on what's available. If you have the script, you can get a lot out of it. If you have a finished movie, you can get a lot out of it. But it might miss the fact that in one movie it'll tag it with a brooding lead, and in the next movie it won't tag it with a brooding lead. But just because it's not tagged, that does not mean it's not there. But when you have the human genomic approach, if it's not tagged, it is not there unless it was a poorly coded film. But we have a lot of QA processes along the way to try and prevent that. But that is really important. But another thing that I love that is really important about doing the genomic approach is that these tags, these universal traits, but what you would call a tag, is something like lots of arguments or family problems or family eccentricity. Those are created by genes scoring at certain thresholds, multiple genes scoring at certain thresholds to trigger that trait. But now let's say that there's a cultural event, like, the Black Lives Matter movement. That might not have been tagged before. And so if something like that happens, what you can do is you can create your own. You can create that variable by understanding what genes make up that trait. And then you can create that rule, press enter, and then anything that's ever been analyzed ever that fits those parameters will be tagged with that content. And that's really important. But you asked an interesting question. You asked if we see those companies as competitors, and I would say no. What we see as collaborators more than anything, because we are crazy trying to do this by hand. It's a crazy task. And so we see, the machine learning and computer vision and all of that and natural language processing as additive, as ways to, fast track that process. And so we would love to partner with those kinds of companies because, we are stronger together. The industry has changed. When we first started talking to, clients, I mean, you go back, just a few years, data was a negative term in the entertainment industry. It was you say data and people go like, get out of my office, I'm going to kill you. Like that's just not what you do, especially to a creative. Are you kidding me? And so that's actually another reason why we went with the hand coded approach, is because the creatives love the fact that a human is touching this, because it's a scary thing, the future of entertainment. And one thing that we tell all of our clients is that we're not touching the creative process here. We're not telling you to kill this character or, make this a happy ending from a sad ending, because, frankly, that's not our job. And, if we were to do that, I think we would create just an echo chamber and the same content would be made over and over and over again. But the job of data is to, inspire these decision makings, inspire the creatives to make different, better decisions.
Great. Okay, so we're going to round it up with one last question, and then I'm going to open it up for questions from the audience. So my last question is: can you summarize current applications with specific examples of clients that you have, or things that are sort of they're approaching in terms of signing up with a client, the kinds of applications that you're working on right now, with specific examples, and then they will open up for questions.
Yeah, absolutely. So, as I mentioned before, we work with movie studios, streaming services, etc. I can talk about some of the deals. We can't talk about some other of the deals, as we all know. So one of our marquee clients, the one that really brought us in, was AMC Networks. And they've just been such a wonderful partner for us. And so I can talk through some of the stuff we're doing with them. But another great client that there was just press about was Cinedigm. And what's great about Cinedigm is they're an AVOD platform. And all of a sudden that opens up this entire new world where we're able to work with them to help them both, understand their content better so they can recommend better. They can, improve their ability to discover for their viewers, but also ultimately to work with them to help them communicate to the brands. Because, when you're an advertiser, when you're an AVOD platform, you need to be able to communicate to the brands, to these advertising companies. Why should they spend money on your platform? So with AMC Networks, for example, we've worked with them on a slew of different applications. One would be, helping them understand their brand as a company, right? So what does AMC-ness mean? Because, you know, in this world, you have brands. When you think of Pixar, you think of a brand. When you think of Disney and Marvel, you think of a brand. Or but even, and you can even contrast, Disney to, Marvel to DC. They have wildly different brands. And so when you understand your brand, all of a sudden, if you're evaluating a new piece of content, you could genomically analyze that and understand whether this over or under indexes with your brand. Then, if you were to say, retention campaigns, they have a series that ends. All right, well, let's make sure that these people don't leave forever. And so, things that they can do is if they have a show that ends, they can say, we've all gotten the email. Hey, Andrew, you just finished, Better Call Saul. Here's some other content that you're going to love on our platform. Okay, that's fine. But if you have a genomic approach, and we understand Nelson's taste versus Andrew's, you might use one variable to encourage Nelson to stay. Hey, Nelson, you just finished Better Call Saul. Here's some other content that is inside the criminal world. Because if you can get to that level of personalization, as we all know, personalization is the key to retention in the streaming space because it makes us feel heard as an audience. So that's another way that they can do it. We have a deal with one of our clients where they have a huge library, 100 years plus library of content. And so they're trying to tap into, how do I monetize and, find the value in this, content that may have grown stale. And so if you understand, if you can analyze, you can better navigate, search, and market that content, or maybe even reboot. We've all seen these pieces of content. And the way to do that is to tap into both the genomic understanding of the content and then pairing that with audience. So to really figure out, who is the audience and is there an audience for this?
Great. All right. So hopefully this gives you an understanding of what is the catch. And there's room for a couple of short questions and short answers.
In the back, yeah.
Let me get a mic to you.
Just to say on your point about data, I remember I was pushing like present valuing and comps and blah, 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 blah at Universal. And Lou Wasserman said to me, you got to trust the little man in the gut. So,
oh, absolutely.
But, you have the lymphatic or the limbic part of your brain that's, flawed, irrational, intuitive. You don't know, nobody knows why it works. And then you've got I was thinking of the DNA study when they broke through and thought they cracked the DNA genome, right? Where they got the chromosomes. And then they actually only got 8% of the entire what's in DNA, right? And then the rest they called junk or junk or black material wasn't. Now they're starting to say, well, maybe there is something to that. Maybe God didn't just put junk in your DNA. So my point is, you have measurables. Are you getting just that 8%, or is there some magic left together?
Well, I love that question. And this is, can I borrow you to talk to investors? Because I feel like a lot of times people think that it's just the 8%. Well, they call it the 80-20, right? So the 20%, is what really matters. And this is where I'd argue kind of more for that. It's not junk. We track the variable mud, the element of mud. How much mud is there in this movie? And, I can guarantee you that that is a pretty useless piece of information until the script or the movie takes place in the late, 1918, 1917. And it takes place in France. There's a wildly different experience that happens when there is the variable of mud scores very highly and the variable of mud is non-existent. And so that's when that junk might not actually be junk, because there's nuances in things that drive us to like something, right? But I think you're exactly right. And then also, if you never know what's going to be valuable. And so if you can track everything, then you can find that hidden value. It might not be today. Shoot, it might not even be tomorrow. But maybe in 5 years, that will become highly relevant.
Right. One last one.
Ooh. Oh, ladies up
Very
here.
few.
You can fight over the question. Oh, good.
Like 1 minute.
All right.
Hi, thank you guys. You did
Thank
a good
you.
presentation. So my question is, like I was speaking with her earlier about, there's a lot of content on the streamers in the celebrating the anti-hero, and like you, I kind of had some problems with the anti-heroes because they don't have any redeemable qualities, and they're on this like the hero's journey, and they supposed to be able to learn something from what they experience, and then take it back and bring it back to the community for change. So I think with the anti-hero characters, it's just that with the streamers, the audience really love them. You know, they're celebrating them. So then content creators continue to produce content like that. How can you get content creators to create more space for different genres, such as supernatural stories about supernaturals, young adult content, and I'm trying to think what else I wrote down. So how can you just use this information, the data, so there can be more space for, you know, more stories, supernatural stories, or young adult fiction, or just stories for coming of age?
Absolutely. Well, I mean, there's a bunch of ways to look at that. It's when you think of the anti-hero, if you will, just because it's an anti-hero doesn't mean that it can't be in a superhero or a supernatural. There's a lot of variables that go into making up a character. I mean, just I could show you our character genome, and there's you know tons and tons of variables that make up a character. But at the same time, it's if you have that other content on the platform, if it because that it's not like that hasn't been created, right? And so it's this crossover marketing mentality. It's if there are people that don't love superhero or supernatural or whatever it may be, but there will be variables in that story that also are in this anti-hero story, and so it's up to the platform to decide. And it frankly, when you look at the variables, you can actually look at your audience breakdown and say, well, shoot, there's this hidden gap, there's this audience for this piece of content. How do you message them? Because it's all about messaging, right? And so if you can do that, it really makes a huge difference.
Great. Well, we're out of time, and you can approach Andrew if you have any other questions.
Please.
Thanks so much.
Thanks so
Thank
much,
you,
Nelson.
everyone.
Andrew Tite.